Have you ever looked at a private company like SpaceX and just wondered how? How is it possibly worth hundreds of billions of dollars? Well, today we're going to deconstruct one of the biggest valuations on the planet. We're going to break down exactly how a rocket company gets valued at an astronomical $400 billion and what that tells us about the future of space itself. So let's get into it. First, let's just get some perspective here. This isn't only about one company. We are right in the middle of a massive economic shift. I mean, look at this number. The global space economy just hit a record $613 billion in 2024. This is not science fiction anymore. This is a very real and very rapidly growing industry. And what's driving all that growth? It's something called the new space economy, and this image shows it perfectly. It's this whole interconnected web of industries, in space, in the air, and right here on the ground. The whole idea is that it's democratizing access to space, and it's all being driven by private companies, lower costs, and some pretty incredible new technology. So here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with this new space gold rush. Then we'll zoom right in on SpaceX itself, the $400 billion rocket company. After that, we'll pull back the curtain on how that value is actually calculated. And finally, we'll look ahead to the next frontier, Wall Street. Okay, first up, a new space gold rush. We're talking about a really fundamental change in how humanity gets to space and what we do when we're there. It's moving from something only governments did to a wide-open commercial frontier. So what's the big deal with this new space economy? Well, for starters, it's being driven almost entirely by private players like SpaceX and Blue Origin. And their big game changer? Reusable rockets. That one innovation completely crashed the price of entry to space, which, of course, created this huge surge in demand. And the results of all that? The commercial sector now makes up a staggering 78% of the entire space economy. It's a total takeover. All right, let's zero in on our main case study and see how all this builds into one of the most valuable private companies in the world. Section 2, the $400 billion rocket company. We're going to deconstruct the 5 key factors that are driving this massive number. Factor number 1 is just sheer market dominance. I mean, you don't even need the numbers. Just look at this chart. SpaceX controls over 60% of the entire global commercial launch market. Think about that. If you need to get something into orbit, the odds are really, really good that you're flying with SpaceX. This is the bedrock of their whole business. And how did they grab that much market share? It was a pure cost revolution. Just look at the difference here. A traditional launch could run you $160 million. A SpaceX Falcon 9, under $70 million. By making their rockets reusable, they didn't just lower the price a little bit, they slashed costs by around 90%. They didn't just join the industry, they completely rewrote the rules. Okay, but here's where this story takes a really interesting turn. SpaceX isn't just a launch company anymore. Not even close. Look at this revenue breakdown for 2024. Starlink, their satellite internet service, pulled in $7.7 billion. That's 65% of their total revenue, and it's growing at a blistering 83% year over year. They've pivoted from one-off launch contracts to a scalable, recurring subscription model. And that subscription model? It's not just growing, it is exploding. By early 2025, Starlink had already blown past 5 million subscribers all around the world. So you see, this isn't some little side project. It's become the primary financial engine that powers the entire company. And that brings us to the grand vision, the why behind all of this. Elon Musk has been incredibly direct about it. He said, Starlink is how we are paying for humanity to get to Mars. All the profits from this global internet service are being funneled directly into the company's long-term multi-planetary goals. So you combine market dominance, radical cost efficiency, and this super high-growth subscription business, and you get some serious investor confidence. Just look at this timeline. In late 2021, SpaceX was worth $100 billion. By the middle of 2025, it had quadrupled to $400 billion. That incredible climb just shows you how much the market believes in not just what they're doing now, but where they're going. You know, a jump from $100 billion to $400 billion is just staggering. But it brings up a really important question. How is that number even decided? So let's get into Section 3, how value is calculated. When we say a private company is worth all that money, what does that actually mean? So let's tackle the main question head on. How is a private company valued, right? It's not like a public company with a stock price that's changing every single second. Valuing a private company is a much more deliberate and fascinating process. Now, the first thing to get is that this isn't just people pulling numbers out of thin air. There's actually a rule book. Valuations are guided by a set of global principles, like the International Valuation Standards. They provide a consistent framework, so everyone is playing by the same rules when they try to figure out what something is really worth. And that whole framework really boils down to three main ways of looking at value. You can kind of think of them as three different lenses you can use to answer the big question, what's it worth? You've got the market approach, the income approach, and the cost approach. First up, the market approach. The easiest way to think about this is like checking comps when you buy a house. You value the company based on what other investors recently paid for its shares in funding rounds or private sales. It's all about what the current market is willing to pay. Next up is the income approach, and this one is all about looking to the future. It's based on projecting all the cash a company is going to generate down the line. And when you think about Starlink, with its millions of subscribers and predictable revenue, you can see why this method is so powerful for figuring out SpaceX's value. And finally, there's the cost approach. This one's maybe the most straightforward. What would it cost to build another SpaceX from scratch today? All the factories, the rockets, the technology, everything. It gives you a really solid baseline for what the company's physical assets are worth. Okay, so with a valuation this huge and a clear path for how it's calculated, what's next? That brings us to Section 4, the next frontier, Wall Street. This is where we get into the really interesting tension between SpaceX's long-term vision and the day-to-day demands of the public stock market. This slide really lays out the core dilemma. By staying private, SpaceX can keep its laser focus on the long-term vision, like getting to Mars, without worrying about quarterly earnings reports. But going public would open the door to absolutely massive pools of capital, money they'll need for giant projects like Starship. It's that classic trade-off, control versus capital. And you can't forget just how big that vision is. We're not talking about just launching satellites. The ultimate goal here is to make humanity a multi-planetary species. And to fund something that ambitious, well, some analysts, like the ones at ARK Invest, are projecting that SpaceX could one day be worth over $2.5 trillion. And it's wild, but even SpaceX's own leadership thinks the current valuation might not capture the full picture. The company's president, Gwynne Shotwell, said this: "We can't even envision what Starship is going to do, and I think that will be the most valuable part of SpaceX." In other words, they believe the real value is in a future we can't even properly imagine yet. And that leaves us with this final, really big question. As we stand here on the edge of this new space era, what's the best way to pay for it all? Is it through the singular, focused, long-term vision of a private company, or is it through the massive democratic power of the public markets? The answer to that is going to shape not just the future of one company, but maybe our entire future out there, among the stars.